Now, 200,000 passengers are expected to pass through Dublin Airport this weekend. It will be a real test of DAA's plan to address the chaos that we saw last weekend. On the line is Eoghan Corry, editor of Air and Travel magazine. The first wave of flights, Eoghan, currently underway. How are we getting on so far?
Getting on fairly well so far. The big question is how it will work over the weekend, because it doesn't take an awful lot to knock out the arrangements at Dublin Airport as it stands. What happened last Sunday was very, very quickly they lost control of the queues. But if you were to look at this time, there shouldn't be a problem. The first flights really aren't coming for the next 20 minutes, and then the big rush starts around between 6 and 9 o'clock. So Terminal 2, oddly enough, is a longer queue than Terminal 1. It's 35 minutes. Terminal 1, where most of the problems have been right through this, is only 10 minutes. That app information from Dublin Airport, though, can swing massively. You can go from 10 minutes to a 40-minute queue very quickly when channels aren't open. A couple of channels don't open in time.
And they've set up these new marquees, Eoghan, and I suppose there's Plan A, there's Plan B and there's Plan C. I mean, there's a lot of plans there.
Yeah, what we're dealing with is something like happens in the HSE, and I leave the listeners to work out how efficient that is. It's effectively you get triaged by the equivalent of a nurse when you arrive, and if you've got just a sprained ankle or if you're life-threatening, you get straight into the queue, and if you've just got a sprained ankle, you go to the back of it. They're going to look at times. What we saw, particularly in the aftermath of last Sunday, Trish, was a lot of people arriving very early in the morning, sometimes 2, 3 a.m, people in an afternoon flight ahead of people in a 9 a.m. flight. Very disconcerting for everyone. The check-in desks aren't open. Airlines don't check in hours in advance, although all of them have opened a little bit earlier since the crisis first emerged with the summer schedules in March. But really, it's very difficult to say to somebody who's been waiting for 3 years for the holiday and have a clatter of kids all excited, don't only come 2.5 hours before your flight or 3.5 for a long-haul flight when people missed their flights last Sunday.
And you can understand why people come early, because they're
Absolutely.
Like, there's no way in hell I'm going to miss this flight.
It's a big, big deal in a family. I mean, everybody's been looking forward to this for so long. Very easy for Dublin Airport to say people are arriving too early. Interestingly enough, we've been around the houses with this before. We had terrible problems way back in the mid-noughties when we only had one terminal, and clearly Terminal 1 was burst into capacity. We went past 20 million in a terminal which had a capacity for 12, and we ended up with a situation for a while. People were arriving at 6 a.m. for a 3 p.m. flight. It's really, I think a lot of what the headlines that came out of Dalton Phillips' appearance in front of the Oireachtas Committee, listeners will be well familiar with the details of the plan, which were, they came out by a drip. But one of the things that got a really hostile reaction on social media was this idea of putting people in holding areas, a bit like the cattle marts in the old days, where you're pushed into a side pen and left until you're brought into play when the flight is about to leave. A very hostile reaction to it. I suspect a lot of that is just to send the message out: do not arrive hours and hours and hours early for your flight.
And Eoghan, look, it'll be all hands on deck this weekend. I've no doubt about that, right? But what about the other weekends? It's only going to get busier.
It's going to get busier, but the throughput of trained personnel, and this is where the problem is. 248 let go during COVID, 350 recruited, but the 350 recruits, which would have solved the problem if they were all on the ground for March, are only being put on the ground now, and they're coming through at a rate of about 30 a week. Last Sunday, obviously there's a huge conflict if everything is under strain. Dublin Airport Authority are stretched, airlines stretched, the people servicing airlines are stretched. But the trigger last Sunday was that 17 who were due to arrive didn't arrive. They weren't they weren't through all the clearance, a very intensive system of clearances. They weren't through all of that by Sunday morning. They couldn't start on Sunday morning, and then we had 20 very sudden no-shows, absences through sickness. And once you, as the Kildare footballers discovered against Dublin, once you let in 4 goals in the first 20 minutes, very hard to get the match back. So what we're likely to see, and this is where listeners will be most interested, over the next 4 weeks, we've got 30 people coming every week. The 17 that were due to start last week are in the system now. So more people are coming into the system. That leaves a little bit more flexibility for Dublin Airport to deal with a situation where there's a sudden number of absences. And in the era of COVID, absences are a big problem. They're an absence right through the network. We've seen airlines like EasyJet cancel hundreds of flights this week. We've seen one of our tour operators right across Europe in fierce trouble. And we've seen queues, massive queues in other airports. It's not confined to Dublin because that's the nature of post-COVID travel. Big surge of passengers and more volatility in the workforce because of the nature of what we've just been through, Trish.
And it'll come down to the amount of security lanes open, as you said.
Once we have enough people, there's more people in place this week than last week. There's going to be another 30 the week after. June 24 is the peak day. If you're to look at the schedules, you can factor in that most aircraft are full, 85% full at this time of the year. But if you're to look at the number of flights, the peak day for the year will be June 24. And the key is that more people are being put in place every week. It's going the right direction. But everything is under pressure. We've had instances with airlines where there weren't enough people to check in bags, and we've had delayed flights that missed connections in places like Frankfurt, and we have issues with gates, we've issues with the baggage coming in, people coming home, waiting for the baggage. Everything in the airport is under pressure. That's not going to go away quickly. That's going to be right there through the summer. A little bit more stress for travelling, but it's certainly everybody looking forward to getting away again. Some people, as I say, haven't been away for 3 years. It's certainly worth doing.
Oh, and I have anxiety even thinking about it. Eoghan Corry, editor of Air and
Travel
Magazine. Thank you for joining me this morning, and good luck to anyone flying this weekend. Now, at 6:25, we'll take a look at your traffic and travel.
Newstalk.